Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for tuning in to my Torah talk. As many of you know, I'm Rabbi David Baron of Temple of the Arts, and it's a pleasure to be able to connect with you virtually until we can connect personally. I'd like to talk a little bit about events happening around us through the lens of the Torah portion. This Shabbat, the Torah portion, is the portion of Bo, where God commands Moses, come to Pharaoh, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh, and convey the message to let my people go. And also it describes the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And many commentators said, why would God harden Pharaoh's heart and then convict him or hold him responsible for refusing to let the Israelites go? That would not be a fair God. Actually, the first number of times that the Torah describes Pharaoh, he hardened his own heart. It uses the word that he hardened his own heart. He refused to acknowledge that there was any power greater than he was in ancient Egypt. And therefore, what we had was a clash of civilizations, a clash of Weltanschauungs, world outlook or world view. There was this one view of the ancient empire of Egypt, where Pharaoh was on top as the ruling monarch and also as a god, as the ultimate God. And then there was the God of the Hebrews, the God of the Israelites. He represented freedom and the dignity of every human being, even and especially a slave. And in ancient Egyptian society, a slave was worth less than an animal's life. Remember, the ancient Egyptians were what were called zoomorphic polytheists. They worshipped every animal that came out of the Nile River, but yet the life of a slave was meaningless. So you had this clash of civilizations, the clash of worldviews. And of course, Pharaoh could never acknowledge that there would be anything more powerful and more important than he was. And of course, this resulted in not only his hardening of his own heart, but ultimately with each plague that followed, proving to him that he's up against a much more powerful force, his heart was hardened with each experience. And that's true of human nature. When you inure yourself to something that you can't believe is happening, each time you go deeper and deeper into denial. Well, the Torah portion goes on to describe the plague of darkness, and some claim that it was an eclipse. Others claim that there was the volcanic explosion on the island of Santorini, which sent a huge ash cover all over the Mediterranean and including Egypt at that time, causing darkness. Whatever you ascribe it to an actual miracle or to a miracle tied to a geological event, there was total darkness during the day in ancient Egypt, and it was frightening for the ancients. And the Torah says it was so dark that one man could not see his brother, his fellow. And that idea of being unable to see the agony and suffering of your brother, your fellow man, your fellow human being, is of course symbolic for many of us of what we've been going through lately. We've gone through this terrible political divisiveness, and we've been unable to see the other perspective. Now we need to move together as one nation. In another quote from the Torah, Pharaoh asks Moses, so who's going? Mi vami haholchem, who's going with you to leave Egypt? And Moses responded, I'm not going to take just a few men and go off for a few days. B'na'arenu u'vizkenenu nelech. We will go with our young and our old, with our sheep and our cattle, with all of our possessions. We will leave Egypt into this state of freedom. Now, what's interesting is the unity expressed there. We'll go together as one people. And I think that's what we all have to strive for, each of us in our own individual way after the presidential inauguration, to say we must unite and work together for the benefit of our country. Look, we face this horrific pandemic. Many of us can't believe it's been a year since kids have been in school. It's been a year since we've all been able to experience freedom. We've been in various states of lockdown. Many of us have died from this horrible pandemic. Many others have been crippled and affected long-term by its implications. Many have, of course, survived. And the bottom line is we have to have compassion for each segment of that population. And for me, personally, as I've seen so many Zoom funerals that we've had to conduct because we couldn't give each other a hug or an embrace and offer comfort directly to one another. This has been a difficult time, calling for us to unite together as men and women of conscience, as fellow Americans, and move our country out of this pandemic, to move it forward. I know that many of you are thinking, well, how can I do that? There'll be many ways you can begin to see that there is indeed a bright future ahead of us. And I'm going to be conducting a webinar on Sunday, and I want you to invite all of your family and friends to be part of that webinar. It's free of charge to everyone. Myself and a number of other spiritual leaders talking about tools and techniques for evolving into the next normal. Please tune in, because we all have to believe that there is a future. Hope is essential for every human being, to believe that we'll persevere and come through. We can only do it if we're united together as brothers and sisters, moving in the same direction. So I hope these messages from the Torah portion enlighten us and give us a sense of hope, of the possibility of redemption, of freedom, which is so precious. It must never be curtailed. It must never be censored. It must never be canceled. Each and every one of us has that basic right to freedom, which is so precious that we have to work together to preserve it. I hope you'll take this message to heart this Shabbat and into the coming weeks and months. Shabbat Shalom.